Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this special meeting for the Board of Education, and we will jump right in, and I will have our, well, actually, we're not voting on anything in this meeting, so do we still need to, well, we'll take roll. Yes. So I will ask our board secretary to take roll.
Member Lopez?
Present.
Member Otto?
Here.
Member Craighead?
Here.
Member Benitez?
Here.
Member Miller?
Here.
And Member Nuala?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's see, do we have anybody to speak? Anybody for public testimony?
No, we do not have anyone.
No. Okay. In which case, we will jump right into our staff reports.
President Craighead, I just wanted Mr. Kalanick to address our network issues just for a moment.
Mr. Kalanick.
Yes, thank you, President Craighead. Just wanted to acknowledge that we are experiencing some technical difficulties today, and advise that if the public may notice some disruption in the real-time streaming of the meeting event. So we wanted to apologize for that. We're going to carry on as best we can, and if there are any significant issues, of course, we'll let you know and pause and regroup as necessary. But unfortunately, we were not able to resolve those issues prior to the meeting.
Quick question, President Craighead. So even if we're having technical issues with the live stream, will the meeting in its entirety still be available when it's recorded?
Yes, I believe so.
Is that okay? Thank you, Mr. Ritson. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, so I will hand this off to Ms. Takahashi.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Craighead. And I will kick off the item and then quickly turn to Ms. Margaret Lamb, who will give the bulk of the report. We're very pleased to present the first interim financial report, which is on the consent calendar for this evening's meeting. This is our first financial report of the year, where we look at revenues and expenditures thus far for the year and update our financial projections. In this report, we ask the board to certify the report, and we're asking for a positive certification, which means that the district will be able to meet its financial obligations for this year and for the 2 succeeding years. You'll see there is a comprehensive memo that accompanies the report to provide just a narrative for the report. And you'll see in the memo and in this presentation right now that we have projections out to 28-29 school year. That's to provide some advance notice on what we're seeing in terms of our financial trends moving forward. But now I will turn it over to Ms. Margaret Lamb.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So for the first interim, the total, I'll jump right in, sorry. The first interim, we have a total revenue of 1.17 billion, most of which is coming from the local control funding formula, about 70%. Next is from the state revenue, about 21%, and our federal remains at 6%. Please note that we did not assume any reduction yet with the federal revenue, because the details of the actual budget has not been released. And they're working on a different fiscal year. That's why there's a trailing. The information is trailing. And then we have a small amount of local revenue of about 3%. So let's jump right into the different factors impacting our biggest chunk of our revenue, our local control funding formula. These are the enrollment, COLA, attendance rate, and unduplicated count, which I would go through one by one just to give everybody a background on what's happening with this and how it's impacting our total LCFF revenue and our total, financial picture as a whole. And of course, the outside LCFF, the economy, and what our share of Proposition 98 also impacts, what we do get. So the first one for the first factor is enrollment. Over the past decade, the district have experienced a steady enrollment decline. In 14-15, we have about 80,000 students, but by 24-25, our enrollment fell to 62,600, which is about 16,000 students and roughly 21%. Just to put it in context, because like our enrollment is like in the 60,000 level. When we're talking about 16,000 drop, it's almost like losing a mid-sized school district like Pasadena Unified, Santa Barbara or Ventura Unified. They all, like as an entire district, they only have about 16,000 students. And so that's the amount of students that we've lost across over the last 10 years. So, and this trend is expected to continue on in 25-26. We have our enrollment there for 26-27, 27-28, and 28-29. It's averaging about 2.5%, but 28-29 actually have a slightly higher. It's in the 3% range because of live birth. Like we factor in our enrollment projection live birth data, and we go as far as like looking at the zip code that we cover in terms of our demographic area. Because if you just look at the state level, it might not show up. And then if you look at the county level, it's more aligned. Our enrollment is more aligned with LA County. And then we have and then we look at it from like, like babies that are born, and then we log them for 4 years for TK and then 5 years for RK enrollment. The next factor is the COLA. This is every year we get a COLA, and it was supposed to, the intent of it, for COLA stands for cost of living adjustment. The intent of it is that it would help the district keep up with rising operation costs. But if you look at this year-to-year comparison, the blue line, the blue bar is our LCFF growth rate, and then the orange bar is the statutory COLA. If you notice that it's not a one-to-one relationship. What I mean is that if the COLA is going up by 1%, it does not automatically mean that our LCFF revenue or our revenues also go up by 1%. A good example is the 24-25. The statutory COLA is at 1.07, but if we look at our LCFF revenue, it actually dropped by 3.48%. Same thing is true for 25-26, where the statutory COLA is at 2.3, but our LCFF revenue growth is actually a negative 1.25. And then if you look at the out years, the COLA is a little over 3% in all 3 years, but our LCFF revenue barely actually increased by 1%. And so this is not enough to actually even just fund our current expenditure and the growth rate that we're experiencing in our expenditures in our expenditure.
Margaret, just a quick comment on that. I know that we referenced I think the phrase is net COLA in the memo and then the documentations. Might it be helpful in one of these graphs to show what the net offset is if we're using both of these graphs in terms of LCFF revenues and the COLA? I think it would be helpful to lift up exactly the point that you just made, if there's a way to either, not for today, obviously,
yes,
but to demonstrate I think I'm using the correct, do we call it net COLA? Is that the official term that we use, Yumi? Or?
We use net COLA because that's just the COLA that we actually received.
Right.
It's the COLA from the state net of our enrollment decline and any compensating factors for
Right.
that. So that we can call it a net COLA or an effective COLA, but that's what's represented by the green there is the negative 3.48 last year and the negative 1.25 for this year.
Oh, so that is that.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
got it.
Yes.
That's already taken time. Okay.
Yes, that
Yes.
takes
Got
into
it.
consideration.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
And then also I have a quick question about the out years. These are just predictions, right? There's no way of knowing until we get there.
So the statutory COLA is actually a projection from the Department of Finance. They actually would release their multi-year projection. seeing that the LCFF revenue actually doesn't grow by 3%, but it's actually only growing in 26-27. It's expected to grow. It's expected to grow about 0.71%. That's where you have your like. You're not getting 3%. I know in the, out there in the field, right? Like the state would always say, "Oh, I fully fund education," but really fully funding education, if you factor in declining enrollment and everything else, does not equate to a year-over-year increase in revenue.
Particularly if the students that we are losing are unduplicated.
Yes,
Students.
that actually multiply the like it's actually make the problem bigger, which I would.
Yeah, and Ms. Craighead, in terms of the COLA assumptions that we're using, those are provided by the state, and those can change. Those are just based off of a calculation of government expenditure increases. So those COLA assumptions that are given by the state often change. So those are what we have now, but will change, and then it would change our financial projections as well.
Yes. And then the other factors that impacts our revenue or our LCFF revenue is the attendance rate. Our attendance rate pre-pandemic is about 95%. Right now, for the first interim, we're assuming a 91.89, which is the same as last year. So we have not rebounded, or attendance rate have not rebounded. I know that in our tracker, the district launched You Belong campaign to make the attendance rate like at least at 94 or higher. It's showing up at 94 now, but we could not make that assumption because last year, the same time frame, we were also at 94, but we ended the year at 91.89. So what we need to do is actually to make the attendance really like hold at 94 from now until I don't want to say this in public, but until April 15 at least, because P2 is based off of April 15, right, data. So that's for the attendance rate. And then our unduplicated count is actually lower. Last year, we have 63.71, and this year we are at 61.89. So that means that our supplemental and concentration, or the increased services that we're investing in our LCAP plan, is now lower. Like the revenue for it is now also lower, or expected to also go down in the next few years. So that's about 36 million across 4 years, just because of that change in assumption from 63.7 to 61.89. And we did not factor in any more drop in 26-27. We just kept the 61.89 steady. So next year, if it continues to go down, then you might see an additional impact to the revenue as well. And this year, it's significantly higher because we've lost approximately 1,800 unduplicated students compared to our enrollment decline of 1,300. That means the students in our population, like it's almost like your population is now lower, and the subset of that, the percentage that's unduplicated, the subset of that is actually even lower. So it's almost like there's a multiplier impact on the revenue. And for every student that we have about like 7,500 that we get for concentration. Concentration means it's 55% or higher. If you're a district that is lower than 55, then you won't get that total concentration factor. And that's one thing that we're actually trying to also watch out for, because that would totally wipe out about 40 million just by going to lower than 55%. Hopefully we don't get there, but we're closely monitoring that as well.
Margaret, I just want to highlight what you just said, because I think oftentimes we don't capture what you just said on an ongoing basis in terms of who unduplicated students are, and what the importance that the funding to support those unduplicated students, the impacts that these declining enrollments have. So I just want to make sure that I'm capturing that. So unduplicated students are students that are in our foster system,
so the-
English learner. I'm sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's okay.
English, sorry.
The unduplicated students are our low-income student, our foster youth, homeless, and our English learners.
Yes. And what I heard was that if the overall population of our students is at least 55% unduplicated, we receive the additional LCFF
Concentration.
And I also heard, again, I want to uplift this for our community members, that we are disproportionately experiencing a higher decrease in our unduplicated students than our overall enrollment decrease in the district.
Yes, for 25-26, we do see that trend.
And so the magnifier, multiplier effect that you suggested here is in relation to, we're not just experiencing decline in enrollments, but we are disproportionately experiencing decline in enrollments from our most underserved students.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So it has it's almost like a double whammy type thing, right? Yeah. So the next one, so let's go to the other side of the equation, which is the expenditure. Our salaries and benefit continues to be a biggest chunk of our spending. It is approximately 78% is spent on salaries and benefit, and we break it down by like local control accountability plan of like 942 million, which is composed of supplemental and concentration and the LCFF base. And then we have our state grants and entitlement, which is like our special ed, arts and music, our extended learning opportunity, and some of the other state grants that we do get. Our title programs are still, like, we're still spending because we're running the programs as status quo. We have not recognized any reduction in those programs in 25-26 at least. And then we have a small amount of local grants and entitlement. So there are several factors that impacts or cause pressure that like our expenditure is like that. The reason why our expenditure is going up. One of them is our health benefit have increased or projected to increase on an annual basis of about 3.5. And then we have our STIRS rate contribution and our PERS contribution, and we have not assumed any salary increase for this year or moving forward. We would reflect that as when we do have our agreements signed, or if we have any agreement signed, that's the time that we would reflect it. A special education annual cost increase of 15 million. This is actually an improvement from what we have in June, just because of the early proactive action that has happened. It used to be 20 million to 15. It's now approximately about 15 million annually. And then we have increase in utilities of 4 to 5, and our student transportation costs increase is about 10%. To 26-27 in the out years. So this slide, as a result of both revenue and expenditure, the district is now operating in a period what we call spending deficit. We actually started deficit spending in 24-25, where we had a deficit spend of like 46 million, and it's projected to grow high by the third year, by the 27-28, which is the statutory year that we're supposed to reflect, our projected spending deficit would exceed 100 million. And by 28-29, because of the one-time state funding that would expire, it's projected to actually grow by 155 million, up to 155 million. So these are the ending balance projection. If no corrective action is taken, we're basically spending down our reserve like really fast. That's the only term that I could think about. Like, so if you notice that when we close the books in 24-25, we have an ending balance, unrestricted ending balance of 379 million. And by 27, 28, it would be down to 96 million. And in 28, 29, if we don't do anything, we would be officially in a deficit, which of course, LACO and the state would not accept that. We have to do early proactive action in order to make sure that we meet the minimum reserve of about 30 million a year. But in 28, 29, if nothing else happened, then it's going to be a negative 60 million, which, you know, as a district, we're not going to allow it to happen. So there's action that we have to take especially by the time that we get to June, because June 28, 29 would officially be included in the reports that we would be submitting to the state and to the county.
And can I go back to the slide about expenditure highlights? With the STIRS and PERS contributions, have those leveled off the last few years?
Yeah. So the STIRS contribution rate is actually leveled off just because STIRS is actually in statute. Like, unless the legislature change it, it's going to be staying at 19.1. For CalSTIRS, every March, the CalSTIRS board would look at their investment and see how can we fully fund their liability, and they would adjust that rate accordingly. The good news is that it's slightly steady right now, just because of maybe their investment rates, but the last rates that the CalSTIRS board actually released, it's about 26.8%. It's about the same thing in the out years as well. There's a year, I think, on the third year where it's slightly lower, which we assume. So every time we do an interim, we would look at the DOF projection for PERS contribution as well. So that one is not. It's increasing a little bit, I would say, but it's not the same as before when it jumped from a 7% to now we have almost 30% for CalPERS. Yes. And then, these are some of with the district now in a period of deficit spending, it's essential that we take thoughtful steps to close the gap while keeping our student at the center. So the district approach includes improving attendance. Every additional student day generates about $75 per kid. Our You Belong campaign is encouraging that daily attendance for our students. So it's not just I know it's like, you're encouraging attendance because of the money, but it's also good educationally to actually have our student inside the classroom. That, it's a combination of both. And then we are aligning programs and resources to what most support student learning. As we have limited resources, we have to look at our programs and do a program prioritization of what actually helps or what help us achieve our board goals and our initiatives, right? And then using attrition, natural retirements, and resignation to right-size staffing with minimal disruption. So we have declining enrollment, so it's just natural that we would have also reduced staffing need, and the district is trying to look at natural retirements and resignation just so that we don't impact too many of our existing folks. And then we have identifying efficiency and cost containment through program consolidation and operational streamlining. The district has been in an ongoing process of looking at all their operations and all their the functions of the different units and offices, and seeing if we could consolidate some or if we could implement strategies like in special ed, cost containment strategies to just streamline the process or take a look at those processes, which we have been doing in 25, 26 as well. That's why you see a slight improvement in that area. And then leveraging one-time funds. We did get some one-time funds from the state, and what we assume in the first interim is that this one-time funds would help mitigate some of our unrestricted deficit, that we are able to transfer some of the expenditures that we have to this one-time funding, which disappears in 28, 29. That's why you see the amount or the gap widening in that year. So this one is just an illustration of how do we close that gap. So if we have expenditure adjustments or if we have revenue adjustment, the revenue line goes up and then the expenditure line goes down, it actually lessens the gap between expenditure and revenue. We're not yet there, but with proactive action, we could be. And early action is, it's not as much of a shock to the system if you do it earlier. Then you don't fall off like just a cliff of like suddenly everything is decimated in 1 year. Then that way you almost like bridge a gap, or you have a bridge to actually take time and, do a really deep dive on like what we as a district could do without losing our focus. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I understand that this is for illustrative purposes only,
Mm-hmm.
but I would hate if I'm misunderstanding this for our communities to get the wrong idea. This makes it seem like 25, 26 will be the first time that we're looking at efficiencies and cost containment and or a reduction in expenditures. My assumption is that we've always been trying to do
Yes.
this, that this is just illustratively how we could address the gap moving forward, right? I don't want folks to get the wrong idea that we haven't been trying to be
Yes.
efficient and looking at reductions prior to 25, 26.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. So because like the 22-23 year up to the 24-25 are actually actuals number. So we did not like that one. But if we did not do anything from the very start, that gap or your ending balance would probably be lesser right now.
I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost, that we're not just right now starting to look at stabilization and or expenditure reduction.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then, so what's next? This is the budget cycle. We're in December. So the board, tonight, the board would be asked to certify first interim for a positive certification. And then in January 10 is when we would hear from our governor to see like if there's any changes in the revenue assumptions or if there's any new funding in the state level. That's when we would reflect it. And we would reflect it in March of 2026, which is our second interim. This is the next official update that we would give to the board and the next official report that we would have to submit about our financial condition. So, but before I end, I just wanted to, I don't want to end in a very negative note of like, these are the deficit, but I do want to acknowledge our collective effort. The district has been collaborating with various stakeholders, like through collaboration and focus on our core. And in those discussions, every time that there's like a discussion, it's always centered on educational excellence and equity. How do we further that in? So I'm confident that our district, with district's resilience and ability, we could move forward together. And it's not something that's unattainable, that we could do it by collaborating together. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Margaret. I know a lot of work went into this. My question, maybe it's more directed to our superintendent. So, Dr. Baker, you've, in the last few months, been doing these budget updates for our community. I know we have an attendance tracker as well, and we have different resources and information on our various platforms and websites. I'm wondering if there's a place on our website or if there's thinking already around having sort of up-to-date information on enrollments, our unduplicated count, because I know we can get there, and I know our institutional research team has a lot of this data. Is there sort of like a one-stop place where we can, on an ongoing basis, look to see how our enrollments, our subgroup percentages look?
I'm not aware that we've considered that. It's something that we could look into. Definitely starting with the attendance tracker was important to us, but that's something that we could look into. I'm imagining also that the changes are easier to see in bigger time periods, day to day, you may not see,
Right.
the changes, but that's something that we could look into
Right.
putting on our budget update webpage.
Right, and in particular, like, again, I wouldn't necessarily say they're exactly the same. I think the learning, being in the classroom, is more important than the money itself. But I think it's important for community members on an ongoing basis to understand attendance is not just about reporting.
Right.
Right, attendance is obviously about the learning that's involved with your present, but that there is a real financial implication to being at even 91%.
Yes.
I think, again, if we're talking about broader policy considerations, we're losing students, but we're disproportionately losing more of our poor students, of our students in our foster system, of our multilingual learners. So I think that's the piece where, at least on our end, we only probably talk about this publicly once or twice a month. You all are reconciling these things
Yeah.
daily, but I think that's where, just like with the budget engagement, budget updates, Dr. Baker, I think it's important for our communities to be informed about what we're talking about here when we talk about expenditure reduction, when we talk about the defunding of public education, when we talk about state funding sources, federal funding sources, that there are real human lives, in this case students, attached to that, and that our most underserved students are disproportionately being divested from under these projections. So that's where I'm coming from in terms of having that information, just like we've done with our LCAP engagement process, with all the other efforts, not just around transparency, but around the implications here attached to our funding sources.
Yes.
Just wanted to add, one of the populations that we're talking about are students who are facing some housing insecurities, and that's part of that unduplicated student count. One of the ways that we kind of report that is through the student housing questionnaire, which we have seen a drop in, people filling those out. And to be eligible for services, to be counted for that, it includes students that might be facing some housing insecurity, but also underhoused, so maybe living in a
Families.
double-dub or triple-dub situations, maybe living in spaces that are not necessarily designated as houses, so maybe garages, it's different places. And so those services are available through our district, but we have seen that there is some hesitation of parents wanting to fill that out, and just wanted to highlight, we do not ask for any type of social security, or we just want to know what the student housing situation is so that we can provide those services.
Yeah,
Thank you for mentioning
Yeah,
that,
thank
Claudia.
you.
And this is also around destigmatizing our most vulnerable populations, right? So yeah.
So if there are no specific questions to the first interim, Yumi and I are going to then provide some context and just some high-level opportunities to talk about the fiscal prioritization and stabilization memo that is in the board materials, starting on page 160 for anybody who's accessing them from prioritization and stabilization are experiencing deficit spending. And this actually gets to the point, Juan, that you have raised, that education in our state cuts in our federal funds, but that is looming. And so we've had to make reductions in Title I because of what we're hearing about Title I resources, and we have other programs that are fully funded, like Head Start, fully funded by federal funds, and those are all at risk of federal decision. So lots of context to take into consideration. And so just a few things to highlight, and then Yumi's going to wrap us up with a consolidation of information around fiscal prioritization and stabilization and what it actually stands to do in terms of our financial position. You heard a lot. Margaret spoke really well about generating revenue through improved attendance. As is cited in the memo, each day of student attendance generates approximately $75, and every 1% of attendance is about $8 million of additional funding. Right now, we're tracking, if you look at the tracker, 93.6%, and the challenge is to maintain that. Our financial team cannot change the assumptions that we operate within, even if we aspire to have 95% attendance. Those assumptions cannot be built into a future year budget until they actually can be assumed and exist. And so we will have to continue to use the assumptions that are that have been planned right now at 91.89%. Looking at page 2 and page 3, this describes considerable expenditure reductions. And actually, let me quickly go back. The opening paragraph on page 160 provides public access to a guiding principles document that anchors in the board's goals and guardrails, that also includes our things that we are educationally by ed code responsible for and for compliance reasons responsible for, and with a focus on our excellence and equity policy and the efforts that we are doing to advance what that policy stands for. And so with that in mind, we have, since last year, we have worked hard, and these categories represent areas that the board will feel familiar with because you have had ongoing updates, but this is also now available for our public. That there has been an analysis and a study of central office, and significant reductions have been made for a July 1 start, which means that we will continue to have a freeze and things that we can reduce and contain costs on this year, and effective July 1, operating with a significant reduction in central services, including about a 10% decrease across central office. And you can see the financial figures, which Yumi will actually sum up in her part of this presentation. The second category is alignment of staffing with projected enrollment. And essentially that is with what is projected into next year's schools, the continued decline, the allocation of teacher and other school staff, and you can see a few other categories that are there in the memo, are assigned based on that reduced enrollment. We have had a history of being 1 year behind and using this year's numbers for next year's allocation, and we can no longer do that. And so this year we hit our projections thanks to a team that does that. And with the projections that are in place for next year, we'll align the staffing allocations based on those projections. You see a paragraph on Title I expenditure and the acknowledgement that we had considerable Title I carryover that allowed us to expand services temporarily. Some of those services now to take on things that were in the LCFF or in other dollars, now to assume those programs into the Title I budget. There are discontinuation and reduction of some other services. And then to the other program and staffing reduction, this issue that we face that is about the reduction of unduplicated student count from 63.71% last year to 61.89% this year, which is actually the equivalent of $36 million across 4 years. So if you track with that, you can see, and Margaret named it, the compounding effect of being early in the reduction so that you get the out years impact of those reductions. That is requiring us to make reductions in the areas that are noted as bullet points and will have an impact in our entire system and for those services and how they have been provided. This fiscal stabilization and prioritization also includes the second closure of a school that later this spring we will be back to the board with a multi-year sequence of school consolidation or closure because of the dramatic decline that we have hit. We are also in the company of many, many California districts and frankly districts across the nation that face dramatic reduction in enrollment to public education. And so this also is hitting us. There's a cost savings to that. We, later tonight, will be talking about school closure and taking an opportunity while we have to do a school closure that is very hard to do, also looking at our programming and how we can make something good out of something that is very hard. And you'll hear tonight about the school closure that is combined with the expansion of dual language programming. So as transparent as we can be with our community, this information, not only is it posted in the board agenda materials, it has also been posted on our budget update website and provided with an explainer video to the public who is interested in getting into the details of our budget. And with that, Yumi's going to close with some illustrations of impact.
Yeah, just to.
Dr. Baker, I'm sorry, can I just ask one question about what you shared before we transition? Because this also may help Ms. Takahashi lift up part of this question. So if I can ask you sort of take a step back, Dr. Baker, more of a systems sort of thinking here. Fully appreciative of the efforts we're making to increase our average daily attendance through our You Belong campaign, conversations that we're having. But as Dr. Solsa Valderrama just shared, it sort of got me thinking that really a big part of our enrollment loss and of our declining attendance percentages is beyond the scope of our educational mission, whether we're talking about housing insecurity, cost of living, affordable housing, basic needs insecurities, right? Food insecurity. We just experienced a horrible month in November where students and families weren't sure what they were going to eat that month. Issues around safety. Students and family members worried about being kidnapped and deported on their way to and from school. So, and again, I can go on and on around other safety issues, students' mental health, the trauma that households are experiencing because of the nonsense that's going on politically, socially, economically in our country, but what the impact is locally here for Long Beach. So what conversations and or plans for conversations is our district having with our with the city, with our county, with our institutional partners? Because it's one thing for us to, try to address many of these sort of systemic inequities through the attendance. But quite frankly, if students and their families are hungry, are afraid of getting kidnapped, deported, are living in a car, then for as much as we will and hope for students to come and not just come, but then be in the right frame of mind to feel like they're not running from something and then be hungry. And maybe their first and only meal is in our school. So again, where are we with our conversations and our planning conversations?
I'll invite in my colleagues who are even closer to this work to comment on a few things that really, I will say, will not address all of the things that you're thinking about, but we have a lot of assets in our community in the relationships that we've built with city staff and other entities. So Tiffany, I see your mic on, so.
We hold impactful relationships with colleagues all around the city, community orgs, city partners, all the time, and especially for hard times. And as we've experienced in the last handful of years, in hard times, we really come together. So we continue to be in a monthly collaboration with the health department, where a group of us from Long Beach Unified come together and resource share information about where we can fill gaps that are being experienced in our communities. And so that dialogue is ongoing and stronger all the time as we experience some things that we've yet to experience and just really continue to build on those things. Our community organizations also are always showing up for community, helping us navigate places where we can be to collectively offer support. So I just can't emphasize enough how much our relationships are important all the time, and especially in hard times, and we have a lot of strength in what we're doing right now.
And Dr. Sosa, I don't know if you want to speak to CYBHI and just some of the mental health supports that you have secured and that are operational, different than some of the things that we have been able to do.
Yes. So I was going to also share that we have staff that are members of the Multi-Service Center, which is also part of the the city's work. We work with the LA County Office of Education specifically to work with supports for students that are in the foster care system or our homeless education program, and to secure resources. For example, they have a partnership with School on Wheels that does tutoring for students, and so we have all those partnerships, and through our wellness centers have a lot of partnerships with community organizations. So we partner with Food Finders, and we've been able to, they actually stock our wellness and care centers with food, and we were able to provide those kinds of resources. We always have them, but they were extra helpful during the time when people weren't having their SNAP benefits in place. And in addition, we have secured the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative grant, so that's CYBHI for short. And we are securing training for our staff in our care and wellness centers, and exploring other ways that we can use it, but really maximizing, because what happens is that we are now able to bill not just Medi-Cal, which we've been able to do for students that have an IEP, but now we can bill Medi-Cal and private insurances for behavioral health supports that are provided to students without disabilities and those with disabilities, as long as it's not part of their IEP. So that's a new source of revenue that's fairly new to us, and we're kind of experimenting and trying to figure out how that's going to work. That also depends on families providing us with their insurance information and their Medi-Cal card information, and so out of the 61,000 students, we have 15,000 so far. So we have a ways to go, and again, trying to get the word out, assuring families that there is absolutely no cost to them. It doesn't come out of their copayment or their premium. It's completely separate. It's subsidized by the state. And it's another way that we could bring in some revenue to our district, and we're hopeful for that.
Lastly, I will make note that Dave Miranda continues to represent us as part of the Long Beach Housing Promise, and that is not a quick solution, but it is a continued consideration for what would it look like across agencies to think about housing in our city in different ways. So without specificity, I can say that he represents us in that way.
Sure. I'll talk about the financial impact of the fiscal stabilization measures that Dr. Baker articulated in the memo. The total savings of $47.5 million, 30.5 that actually benefit our unrestricted general fund. So substantial. Some of those were implemented this year, and some of them are in the planned actions for next year. So here we see the slide taken from the previous presentation with our deficit spending pattern, and so moving forward, in 26, 27, we see that with these expenditure adjustments, we are closing the gap between revenues and expenditures. So we see in the first interim for 26, 27, the gap was $96.8 million, with the planned expenditure changes, a $71.6 million gap. For 27, 28, $115.7 million gap moves to $90.4 million. And then that out year, in which Margaret referenced, $155 million gap, that goes to $130.2 million. So closing the gap between revenues and expenditures. And the way that translates to our ending balances is shown here. So we'll see that directly translates to our ending balances, lifting up our projected ending balances in those years, as shown in the first interim, 26, 27 of 211, with the fiscal stabilization measures in place to 237, 27, 28 from 96 to 146, and from that negative that Margaret had mentioned of negative 60 to a positive 16. So that's with implementation of those fiscal stabilization measures. And so we see that, so this really signifies progress towards, but not really, not fully solving for our deficit spending challenges. So really the name of the game and the strategy is to slow down the spending down of these balances. And with fiscal stabilization measures taken this year, next year, and in subsequent years, it really extends the time that the district has to continue to implement fiscal stabilization measures to eventually balance the budget. So we thought we'd provide these fiscal stabilization measures within the context of the report that we just received from Margaret.
Thank you. That concludes our report.
Thank you. Then, are we ready to move on to the multilingual learner master plan? There's some shifting of seats and nameplates and everything. In just a minute, we'll presentation.
All right, I'm going to kick us off while the slides are coming up. So glad to have Dr. Gonzalez and Ms. Perez here. On behalf of the district, just a few things that I want to highlight before our team gets started in providing the presentation. So this has been a 2-year journey in development, in assessing our practices and introducing new learning across the district, strengthening systems, strengthening opportunities for teachers and others to learn, including greater accountability, including a guardrail that speaks to English learners in our district. Lots of tools. You're going to hear about access to elevation and many other tools that are designed to serve and hold our system accountable for the work that we do with our English learners. And just, I know you all know this, but just reminding all of us that this is a comprehensive plan, that many of the different components of the plan have been activated, put into place, and have existed. Some of them are for compliance purposes. Many of them are for quality and vision purposes that we are going to see brought together, those different components that have been activated, brought together in a way that represents a comprehensive plan in service to English learners and multilingual students. Want to speak in, first of all, I want to thank the writing team. So I see Trace is back there in the audience as well, but Martha Alba Gonzalez, dual language coordinator, Alma Black, ELD and World Language Curriculum Lead, Jennifer Crockett, Assistant Director, ELA and Humanities, Dr. Gonzalez, Director, Catherine Perez Morales, both of whom you will hear from, EL Services Coordinator, Chelsea Powell, and Trace Roth. This has been a labor of expertise coming together, really thinking about what we want the vision for our district to be. And again, I'm going to bring voice to this, and you'll hear it again. But the purpose and the vision of the Multilingual Master Plan provides a comprehensive, equity-centered foundation for identifying, serving, monitoring, and celebrating multilingual learners. The plan affirms multilingualism as an asset, establishes coherent instructional systems, and aligns district practices with the California English Learner Roadmap. And so this vision has taken us a couple of years to get to a very quality, comprehensive plan. You'll remember in March, this team came before you with the English Learner Master Plan and took feedback, engaged with all of you in different chapters, took feedback from you all, back out to the community with the English Learner Master Plan in November to listen and to hear more from those who will be impacted and who have expertise in this area. And then here today with the Multilingual Master Plan. In November, you received the last draft of the English Learner Master Plan before it was actually compiled like this, so you'll recall you received that digitally. And since then, a decision was made to try a name change in thinking about the work that was being done with this team, interacting with folks at the state level in learning cohorts. And so today, the name Multilingual Learner Master Plan comes before you for consideration and for discussion. Okay? What is very important to us is to hear about the contents of this plan and what it aims to achieve, what it aims for us to achieve and be held accountable to on behalf of our English learners and those who are in our system. So super proud of the team that is here and what this work represents from a comprehensive plan, and glad that you'll have an opportunity for insight from the team today. If we run out of time, which it looks like we may, it is on the agenda again for tonight and can be discussed in open session tonight. It's an information item. There's no voting this afternoon, and there's no voting tonight, just an opportunity to get into the details, express your interests, and ask questions. So with that in mind, turning to to Dr. Myers-Miller. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Baker and board, you uplifted all of the elements that we wanted to bring forth today on behalf of the community, bringing forth a multilingual learner master plan. This really has been an effort that is looking towards supporting our students and their language acquisition, and really ensuring that our students have the services and the supports that they need. And so today we have before us Dr. Gonzalez and Catherine Perez, who will be sharing highlights of the plan and how we as a system will be accountable to that plan, and how our learners will benefit as a result of that. So with that, I'd like to have Catherine and Dr. Gonzalez share with us.
Yeah, I'll get us started. Good afternoon, President Craighead, board members, and colleagues. My name is Angelica Gonzalez, and I am the former director of the Office of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development, as I've shifted to leading the other bodies of work under the Chief Academic Office. So I'm here in my role to provide an overview of where we've been, thank the writing team as well, and then I'll pass it over to Catherine to take you through how the plan has evolved and plans for implementation. So as Dr. Baker said, that this plan is compliant in nature, as it describes elements of EL instruction, EL programming, EL support, outlined by California Ed Code and the California English Learner Roadmap. It really has been shaped from the very beginning by DLAC's vision, and DLAC is our District English Learner Advisory Committee. It's been shaped by their vision for what they want for their students, and it is their role, as outlined by Ed Code, to advise the district's governing board and administration on programs and services for English learners. So I do want to recognize their work as well. Since we presented to you last in March of 2024, you encouraged us to meet with additional community groups, with students, and make necessary changes or additions to the plan. And so Catherine will share more about that later in the presentation. So a multicultural learner plan, or an English learner plan, is a local policy, and I think that's important to highlight, that it is, once adopted, it will become a local policy. And as with any policies, it provides, the hope is that it provides consistent, appropriate services to the students that the policy targets. In this circumstance, it's English learners. The plan can help create a shared understanding or a framework for multilingual instruction, programming, and provides a clear roadmap for students from identification all the way to biliteracy. So not stopping at reclassification, although it's important, all the way to biliteracy with that asset-based lens. So why a policy, or why a multilingual plan? I would say it's the same reason for why we would have any policy. It creates equitable, coherent, sustainable systems for English learners. It develops equity-driven processes, hopefully helps a district build capacity on how to deliver research-based programming for English learner students. I know you've read, maybe not cover to cover, although if you did, yay for you. But if you made it to the reference page, you'll see that it's quite extensive, although it needs formatting. We're presenting, we'll call it draft number 2. There's still some formatting issues that we know need to happen. But you'll notice that that reference page is robust because we grounded our practices in research. And the last thing is that it codifies the English learner roadmap, and you'll see those principles highlighted throughout. Hopefully that was evident to you in the plan. Yeah. Dr. Baker has recognized folks on the writing team, although we all, and I'll say we, all contributed meaningfully to a chapter, some of us more. There were really one person from the beginning. Catherine here to my right reminded me just now that she came on board 2.5 years ago, and we actually met for the first time when she joined our team at LACO in our first coaching session. We worked with LACO and Loyola Marymount, who coached us through this process of writing, and that's where we first met. So Catherine has truly been from beginning, and I would say all the way through implementation, as I saw it probably through about 95%, I'll say, before I transitioned to another department. And although this is in alphabetical order, that very last name, which Dr. Baker also acknowledged, but I want to acknowledge them as well, because this person, Trace, and stand up, Trace. Come on, Trace. Although some of us contributed to chapters, a chapter here and there, Trace and Catherine really have seen it from introduction all the way to reference. And they've touched every chapter, they've brought a cohesive voice to the plan, and so I do want to recognize them as they've contributed in a different way. All right, so I mentioned the California English Learner Roadmap, and so some of these slides should be a review, but just a quick reminder, the plan is intentionally written aligned to the roadmap. Sometimes it felt a little awkward, but we made connections, and so hopefully you saw that direct, intentional connection to the principles outlined in the California roadmap, which was adopted by the California State Board of Education almost 10 years ago. That seems, time flies, right? And so those 4 principles that helped shape the vision of the plan are these 4. The first one, assets-oriented and needs-responsive schools, really recognizing and valuing student culture and linguistic assets. You'll hear from Catherine a little bit later as we engage with community, especially parents. This was probably the most important thing we heard over and over and over. We want our students' multiple languages to be valued and their culture as well. And so you'll hear from Catherine in a bit about that. The second one is around the quality of instruction and access. The third, the system conditions, how we align policies, programs to support effectiveness. And the fourth is the alignment and the articulation across the system, which is what the plan's intentions are. You should have also, hopefully, have seen direct connections to our key priorities. Specifically, the star there represents the intentional connections the plan has made to the LBUSD key priorities. The culturally responsive and sustaining leader and teacher practices, culturally affirming classrooms and school environments, implementing leader and teacher professional learning systems, and data monitoring process and structures. Dr. Baker read this vision and purpose of the master plan. So on this note, I will pass it over to Catherine, who will finish off the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for your leadership and guidance over the last 2 years. Madam President, members of the board and district leadership, it's my honor to be with you this afternoon to discuss what we're calling draft 2 of the English Learner Multilingual Learner Master Plan. As Dr. Gonzalez pointed out, this was really a collaborative writing team and really a collaborative effort. And so on behalf of all of the hands that have been part of this, thank you so much. And we especially today look forward to highlighting and elevating and amplifying the voices of our community members, which has really been our work this fall as part of a writing team. So there was a lot of very intentional, thoughtful consideration and recommendations made to us on behalf of our ML community. And so we wanted to focus in today on what additions were made based on the feedback in our listening sessions here. So our table of contents is here, and I'm going to go chapter by chapter to do our best to share out some of the feedback and also some of the changes we made in response to the feedback. And so at any point, if you have a question about the contents of that particular chapter and you wish to ask, feel free to do so and stop me on that particular chapter. And of course, I'll save time at the end for additional overall questions as you see fit. Our first chapter outlines the identification, assessment, and program placement of our English learners. And we have heard from our families and community members that they really would like elevated clarity on common practices throughout our district. And so although it is a very standardized process in terms of a home language survey and an assessment, our families really requested more information and more clarity around this. So our immediate response was to develop a plan with site leadership and also reach out and participate in clerical front office staff training to really make sure that everyone knew when families are completing this home language survey, what does that mean? What implications does that have? We're continuously receiving feedback about the home language survey. And although we can't really modify those questions, what we can do is really make sure that our families are engaged and understand the impact. And so we did our best to highlight that in chapter 1. In chapter 2, we delve into...
Sorry, Catherine, did you say we could ask the question as you're going through the chapter?
Yes, so chapter 1, yeah.
Could you, so this has been there have been questions over the years raised. I'm preaching to the choir here. Could you elaborate more on what some of those concerns were?
Yes.
With either the home language survey and or the initial classification and test, because I think I know. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I would be pleased to. So the questions in the home language survey are very similar. What language did the child first speak? What language do you speak at home? What language is the child most exposed to? Those types of questions. And sometimes families will put more than one language, so English/Spanish. And anything that is other than solely just one language will prompt an initial EL assessment. And a lot of times families will call my office specifically and say, oh, it's really minor exposure to the second language. They're really a true English-only speaker. But after that assessment occurs, it's very difficult to revise that. And so really just informing families what that looks like. And it caused us to delve into what does this look like when families are filling out their enrollment packet? What does that experience look like for users on their phone? Because the home language needs to populate similarly on the desktop versus learned a lot about web applications as a former ELD teacher, so I'm learning a lot about this. So what does that experience look like for our families? And also, who is it that you go to when you have a question about enrollment? You go to the people in the front office. And so really having the opportunity to also engage with them and explain, this is why we ask those questions and this is what it means. So when families come to their school sites, they're able to be informed and be able to answer families with those questions.
Can I take it even one step further?
Absolutely.
Is a component of that also real or perceived that families believe there's a negative stigma attached to being designated or classified initially as an EL? So part of what I've heard, whether it's in informal spaces or at DLACs and ELACs, is also parents trying to not, to fill it out in a way where they don't get classified initially because of the stigma felt, again, real or perceived, attached to, oh, that means my student's going to get held back or not going to learn English or X, Y, and Z. Is that part of that as well?
That is definitely part of the conversation. I will say most of our families, did you want to say something? Yeah. I'll pause.
I think that is probably a real thing. However, we interact with the families that are on the opposite side. So the families that do see multilingualism as an asset and they want to write that down on their home language survey, that they speak both languages. And what they don't understand, because we cannot alter the questions, those are set forth by the state and we are not allowed to alter the questions. They don't fully understand what will happen so they get flagged as to be determined. They are assessed by the initial LPAC. Those are the things that they are not informed fully about. And so when we spoke to parents, so those are the parents we interact with, like, well, I thought it was an asset. I didn't think it was going to mean this. When we interacted with the community and parents in particular around this chapter of the plan, they asked about just how we can ensure, how we can support the office staff, because a lot of important things happen with the enrollment clerk. So how can we support the enrollment clerk so that they fully understand the I'll say consequences, but what will happen when a student or a parent, because there is nothing wrong with saying, okay, let's have a conversation about it. So do you mean da 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 da? And so it's really helping the enrollment clerk so that they can better support families at that time.
I was just going to add one other piece. A lot of what we'll find is on the opposite end of, I really wanted my kid to get into a dual immersion program. And so I said that they were a true EL, but they really aren't an English learner in that sense. And so we work really closely with those families to make sure that it's filled out accurately because the impact it may have.
Yeah.
But there is a differentiation between interest and or thinking about dual immersion, and they're not mutually exclusive, but there is a difference versus being classified and then at some point with the hope of ultimately being biliterate, right?
Yes, we met with an ELAC member this week, just 2 days ago, who said, I really want my kid to be bilingual and I really want them to be a multilingual learner. But right now, we're English only in home. Their child is at a DLI site currently, and they're like, I wish there was a way for me to express my family's desire to build multilingualism. However, my child is not a true EL at the moment. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that home survey is super critical, and that support that the parents get, because household that speaks another language other than English can check that box off for their kids, and we may get the result that we had in this district with my niece, who can barely speak any Spanish. She speaks English, barely speaks Spanish, and could not get reclassified, redesignated. So it's super important, because we also have those situations, right, where, the parents are bilingual, the kids primarily speak English, and then now they're ELs, and they can't even get reclassified, and they don't speak, their primary language is English.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'll move on to Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is really where, as Dr. Baker mentioned, we move from beyond compliance. The requirements and the expectations of most master plans are to really articulate designated and integrated instructional programs, but we really went beyond, with Dr. Gonzalez's guidance, to really expand affirmation of multiculturalism and what does it mean to be a true multilingual learner, and really think about linguistic instruction, grounded in identity, grounded in agency. And I will say this is, I've only been a part of LBUSD for 2.5 years, but this is really what we're hearing from our community. I have the honor and pleasure of hosting our monthly DLAC meetings, and this is a comment from our DLAC members every meeting. And so it was really great to be able to delve into the research and best practices to really identify what this will look like. And so based on feedback from our last session, one of the board members said, it's just too much. It's a lot. It looks like a dissertation. And so what we did our best is to identify the key components, and based on your feedback from the last session, there is kind of a toolkit at the end of this chapter where it is a quick review, something that we can pull from and give directly to sites if you're not interested in reading hundreds of pages. And so in addition to this, at the secondary level, there have been 2 QCI sessions created to support integrated and designated instruction. And also with feedback, we invited EL coordinators to those sessions. So even though you're not per se administering integrated and designated ELD, we still have our coordinators to be a support. And there are also 10 after-school ELD sessions this school year that really are grounded in the essential practices that are in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 questions? Okay, I will move on and get into Chapter 3 here. Chapter 3, again, a lot of our community members have expressed what about our newcomers? What about our LTELs? What about our duly identified students? Trace and I just finished administering the needs assessment to our DLAC, where we get what are your needs? What do you want to hear? What do you want to see us bring to the table? And our top 3 topics: newcomers, LTELs, and duly identified students. And so this chapter is directly articulating the needs from our DLAC community. Our community has expressed more information, more resources, more supports for newcomers and LTELs and duly identified students at the site. We have started a new collaboration with the Special Education and Inclusion Office to develop more of a specific and strategic plan to help with monitoring of our duly identified students. We also have in January and February a 2-part duly identified students with IEP sessions at DLAC. So as a part of DLAC, we are rolling out a partnership with the Office of Inclusion to come to our DLAC as a response to our parents' needs and requests. And Trace and I are also enrolled in a year-long symposium with LACO on LTELs, and it's a collaborative colloquium with districts from across LA County, and actually the state was very popular. They expanded it to the state, where we're looking at systems for monitoring, course placements, and comparing what's happening across different districts.
Question about that chapter. Thank you, Catherine. So this is oftentimes with the newcomers or long-term English learners, our emerging bilinguals with IEPs, where we see, at least the data shows a lot of our educational disparities and inequities, particularly with groups that are with students that are in more than one subgroup. You know, I'll use the example here, our ELs with IEPs. Were there any conversations either with LBUSD educators and or family and community around part of this shift, this asset-based approach? And that's not really a shift, right? It's building on those things. Is also about celebrating milestones, celebrating accomplishments, much in the way we do when someone becomes multilingual and or biliterate, that it is a different milestone, right? If you are a recent arrival, it is a different milestone. If you haven't been redesignated, right, in 5 years or more, it is a different milestone. If you do have an IEP and you also are a multilingual learner, were there any conversations around how do we lift that up in the same way that we celebrate our DI programming and our DI accomplishments?
So that is one of the hopes and dreams expressed by one of our community members. When a few weeks ago, we were at Long Beach Forward and we engaged in the hope and dreams sequence, and what you said was exactly what they affirmed as their hopes and dream, is that our students in LBUSD who are newcomers, emergent bilinguals, are celebrated and honored and respected in the same way that those who are learning an English-only student in a dual language program. And so it is something that we have been in communication with in the community, and something that in the multilingual office we have definitely discussed. That is part of the reason too we have a dual language master plan that is coming, and part of the reason for the two was to also just really hone in on what specific commonalities that exist, but also unique practices that exist for our English learners. Because as you do mention, there are a lot of assets and incredible gifts that come, but there are definitely unique needs, especially in Long Beach.
I think there's also an assumption made, and not by any one individual, but just in terms of our social structures, that students already aren't multilingual, right? They could already speak Spanish and 2 or 3 indigenous dialects. I mean, Board Member Lopez talked about that a student may already be exposed to languages, may not be literate in one, but the exposure, right, the plurilingual or plurilinguistic context here. So I think that also takes away from this deficit approach.
I just want to add one more thing, Catherine, that I don't think we've mentioned yet, is that in engaging with parents, they shared both bright spots and not so bright spots. So they can articulate when their school site has done something where their student has felt celebrated and honored, and they themselves have felt welcomed. And they'll share the opposite as well. But one thing that I'll say we now, Catherine and team, we talked about creating to support this plan is a practitioner's toolkit. So learning from the bright spots. So once they tell us where it's happening, we've done some of that already. We will go to the site and meet with the person, the counselor, the clerk, the principal, whoever is engaging in this promising practice that parents have brought to us to highlight it as with a how to implement so that we can grow those bright spots.
Can I ask a question, actually going back to chapter 2, because a problem with our LTELs is that they've been English learners for years and we can't redesignate them. Looking at the ELD time, just clarify for me, I looked at the plan, and is there a protected time for ELD at the elementary level? Because when I was looking at it, and maybe I just read it, maybe I just need clarification, there is the suggested 15 minutes of ELA, 15 minutes of content in the content, but is there in the plan a very protected time of 30 minutes that the expectation is that that's all that's going to take place, ELD?
What the plan does is it outlines that requirement of 30 minutes. It names the 30 minutes of daily targeted English language development, and then it offers options for how to implement. So thinking about how the approach to implementation of ELD is best when it's the classroom teacher who's implementing, the teacher who knows the student's linguistic needs, who has planned that science lesson and therefore knows what the language demands of that lesson are. And it gives that teacher who's implementing it that option. So it gives them options of breaking the time into 15-minute chunks, because they know that science lesson they're going to teach this afternoon has language demands that require some upbriefing or some direct instruction around the language. So it does not standardize the how, it offers options. It just standardizes the time requirement.
So I've had this conversation, I know with Mr. Moskovitz and a couple of other folks on a number of times regarding when we don't have a protected time. And I want to start by saying I think you've done a great job, amazing, long overdue plan. So thank you. But I do believe that when we don't have a specific time that is dedicated to developing the English language, we may not get the results that we otherwise would. And here's why. If you were, as any parent, like when we think about math and teaching math, if we taught math, on 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here throughout the day in chunks out, the likelihood of you getting the results are going to be very different than if you have a time where just math is taught, right? And of course, you want to bring in those math concepts in the content area, and I think that that's critical and important. But I think I just want you to think about it that way, because our kids need the time to develop that language, and in my opinion, and looking at how we can best help our kids improve, it would be providing that protected time for ELD, specifically for that development of the English language.
Yeah, I mean, I think the plan is a first step in beginning that conversation, and definitely as we implement, or as they begin to implement and plans for implementation, that's something that they can absolutely consider, tightening that up.
If I may add too, the language around, the state's language around designated and integrated instruction is really, it's not specific for a reason. They really want you to be able to support the needs of that student. And so sometimes in practice, if we say 30 minutes and it's that 30 minutes of protective time, it's 30 minutes and it's done, where the needs of that child might be more than that. And so the differentiation, I think, is incredibly important when we're thinking about the design of the learning experience for the student. But I appreciate you acknowledging that, because I do feel that designated time is a critical time for students' instruction.
Yeah, it is, and just the integrating ELD throughout the day and throughout the across the curriculum is also important, and in that development. So, thank you.
I just want to do a time check. About 10 minutes? Okay. Thank you.
I'm going to move us along to access of the core curriculum, specifically the feedback that we heard from families, as Dr. Gonzalez shared, really recognizing and honoring multilingualism. We heard from families a direct quote: "I want my child to go to school and learn English, but not feel shameful or ashamed of their home language. I also want my child to go to school and have the same rigorous learning experience as their English-only peers." And so Chapter 4 in Access to the Core, although it is very much a compliance-based chapter, we really have the opportunity here to review course sequences for accountability and refinement, really look at our programs, and really make a concerted effort to implement, and with our board guardrail, robust English learner monitoring. So monitoring student success, monitoring where we have areas of growth. And I'm pleased to see that we have forms currently, EL monitoring forms for 87% of our English learners right now as of this morning. So a great growth so far, but definitely more to do. And not only monitoring these compliant pieces.
Can you say that number one more time? I'm sorry, I missed it. Say it again.
87%.
Oh, right, 87?
Of our English learner progress monitoring forms have been completed.
Great.
That means of our 8,579 current English learners, of those students right now, 87% of them have had a teacher complete an EL progress monitoring evaluation, noting whether they're making progress towards mastery predominantly at the secondary level, their ELA teachers, and at the elementary level, their overall homeroom teacher. And so it's our hope through that they'll then start to think a little bit more about, wow, this kid is doing X, Y, and Z. Now maybe I should be really reflective of how I refine that designated time.
If I may, just briefly. So as you recall, as you referenced, this is part of one of our interim board guardrails that will be coming in early into 2026 with an update on this. This is actually a great example of where a board goal and interim guardrails aligned to our guardrails comes in alignment with a plan, comes in alignment with then what does the implementation look like to improve outcomes for students. So it's really bringing together, again, the vision, the values that we have from our community, and then put it into implementation.
moving us along, Chapter 5 is really around monitoring, reclassification, and accountability. And similar to the concerns around the home language survey, we heard from families, I didn't know my child was an EL. How can I make sure that I'm helping them with reclassification? The LPAC assessment, what is that experience like for my kid? When is this test happening? And so Trace and I developed site-based PDs for principals to administer to their sites to help teachers. We also push these out in ELACs for parents to have the same opportunity to really look at student data, look at the monitoring and reclassification process. And we built a second one around the LPAC. What is this exam? LPAC 101 for teachers, LPAC 101 for parents, and also a guide to reclassification for students. So they are aware, because in our student conversations, a lot of them are like, I know I take this test every year, I don't know what that means. And so really having an opportunity to engage about what that means and what will help you be more willing to put the effort in to work on reclass.
Thank you, Catherine. So I know we're short on time here, Dr. Baker. So if we don't get to it, we can continue after 5. But on that note, I know that there's also, so one thing is sharing of information and having the information and resources available for students, families, and community. I'm wondering if you heard at all around the question or the challenges that sometimes, I'll give an example. Something may be available on Parent View, but the caregiver or family member doesn't know, oh, that's where I would have to go to find out if my student was designated or reclassified or LPAC information. So wondering if there were any conversations around not just having the information and resources, but then how parents are either communicated with and or are able to access these things.
Yes, absolutely. It's a compliance task to review the annual notification letter at DLAC, but we also took those slides and shared them with our ELAC families and our parent community facilitators to be able to roll that out at the site level. We also really took the time. I know you said just give the information, but we have personally administered these PDs at 13 sites and have attended over 20 ELACs in the last quarter. So I can assure you that we're out there engaging, but also really learning when we're there about what questions come up. And so we're not just designing these and giving them, we're really giving them ourselves to be able to refine and make adjustments and then reshare those slides with our site leaders and also our ELAC and DLAC representatives.
Yeah, and apologies if I misspoke, Catherine. I by no means wanted to give the impression that I didn't believe that you were out and about. But as we all know, we would love more parents to be involved at DLAC or at their ELACs, and for many reasons, they just aren't able to. So if for whatever reason they don't know a señora that's already going or that's going to share the information, just wondering about, again, how do those family members and or caregivers get reminded or get informed, right, about those things? So
yeah, absolutely. And I am really happy that we were tasked with really getting into the community, because I think what has been a result of this is we're on all their listservs now. And so 3 of the community orgs have now said, can you share these slides with me? Or here are our slides, can you look them over? And so I am very pleased that we have gone on this tour, because it has resulted in an ongoing collaboration.
Yeah, so the organizations have shared with us their workshop slides, and they've developed workshops where, especially around the really understanding those very technical forms. Even though we translate them, it still might not be accessible language, and so they've shared those for our toolkit. Yeah.
We will move on to Chapter 6 here, family and community engagement. We kind of talked a lot about the family and community engagement process because most of our revisions were grounded in family and community engagement. But we added a new section in Chapter 6 on affirming environments for multilingual families. As Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, we had families share beautiful experiences where people would just reinvite and welcome them in. And it took 5, 6, 7 times, but after the 7th ask, they felt comfortable coming onto that
campus to the opposite of that. And so we really feel like although we added this section to the chapter, it's really not done. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. And it really needs to, we've refined it, but we need to take it back out because we can't really finish this because it's ongoing work. So we have done our best to honor their requests and their feedback, but the essence of their recommendations are a continued partnership. And so this is one of those chapters that's going to continue to evolve. And we have meetings again in February with 3 of our community orgs. And so it will be an ongoing work. How am I doing on time? Am I? Okay. In Chapter 7, the expanding multilingualism, we heard from our families the desire for an expansion of heritage language programs. Although we're very pleased to have expanded many of those programs, our families are saying it's great, but let's do more. And so we really need to continue to engage with our community partners to consider expansions and more offerings, especially our Khmer Heritage Language Program. Dareth Ung has done a great job in not only leading those programs and those classes, but working on recruiting new Khmer speaking teachers and educators. And so that is an element of the expanding multilingualism chapter that we added based on feedback.
Catherine, if I may, I just want to be clear. So you had said earlier, this particular chapter is specific to supporting English learners and developing their multilingualism through dual language programs. We're also simultaneously working on a dual language plan that would be more inclusive of all students in our district. They're in dual language programs, but this chapter is specifically about our English learners.
That's correct. It started as a part of it. And then we as that grew and grew and grew, as we engaged with teachers around that, we identified a need for a separate plan. Although expanding multilingualism is important because that is the end of the journey that we hope for English learners, it was important to have the chapter and how we support English learners through biliteracy or multilingualism.
Thank you again for all of your hard work. I just have, I saw that the plan is titled Multilingual Learner Master Plan. And while I understand the shift to asset-based multilingual terminology, I also think it's super important that we stay consistent with the state entitled the plan English Language Learner Master Plan. This will align with state terminology and also with, our LCAP, the EL roadmap, unduplicated students, and the California dashboard. And I think equally as important is that renaming the plan to English Learner Master Plan really puts the emphasis on students learning English, right? Because multilingual learners definitely used also when in referring to our English learners, but certainly it is, we're also including our English speakers in the terminology of multilingual learners. So I really hope that we can really reconsider the title of the plan to be consistent with the state and the terminology, and really emphasize the need for students to learn English language, our English learners. Thank you.
Please.
Just for a point of clarification, so first off, thank you for all the hard work that has gone into this. We said almost a labor of love, almost 2 years plus. My goodness. With that said, one of the questions that I asked offline, just as a point of clarification, is that I do understand that we use the California roadmap, which act as a tool, or let's call it as our Thomas guide in the development, right? But with this is not a state required master plan, correct? It's a compilation of a number of state requirements. Is that?
The state requires a plan and how we support English learners. They don't
Correct.
necessarily require a master
A
plan.
master plan.
Yeah,
Correct.
so the plan that is required could be much smaller as we completed in the past.
Correct.
It's a best practice. A more comprehensive master plan is a best practice.
Correct. And that was the part that I wanted to get clarity on before we started, as I think that, and this is why I'm so appreciative of this document, because this document is more of our commitment as a district to be in alignment with our board goals and showing not just our students, but the entire community on how we value our multilingual learners and the process in which we're going to go about supporting them, correct? And this is not just the compliance document expected of us from the state.
Correct. And also I'll add not just board goals, but LCAP goals. So you'll recognize the LCAP goals. We added additional goals. We didn't stop there. We were quite ambitious. So there are board goals, LCAP goals, interim goals, guardrails, and community designed goals as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So in the interest of time,
If I may, President Craig, just for a moment. So what we'll do later this evening, I'm sorry to jump on top of your words there. Thank you, first of all, Angie and Catherine. Later this evening, let's give them a round of applause, and Trace and team. We're not going to ask them to stay until whatever time we come back to this evening. But later this evening, Dr. Myers-Miller will be able to go back into the journey as needed, and more importantly, talk about next steps. It's one thing to have a plan, but what we do with the plan is actually the most important. So later this evening, Dr. Myers-Miller will be able to take it from this point, share a little more information and answer questions and share more about the next steps.
Are you sure Catherine doesn't want to hang out and hear the music? We got some water. Should be a party.
I believe what Member Miller is referring to is the excitement that is happening outside of the boardroom this evening. But I want to thank you very much. It is very exciting to see, and we do appreciate what it has taken to put together this master plan that is approximately 2 years in the making, and it is wonderful to see that it is an asset-based program. So with that, in order for us to have a little bit of a break before our 5 o'clock meeting, we will adjourn this special meeting, but I do want to thank you for all of your work and the presentation.
Thank you.
So we
Thank
will
you.
Thank
adjourn
you for
this
your
meeting,
support.
come back at 5 o'clock.